we don't need to announce, but obviously there are an eruption of protests on college campuses across America. And there's a lot of people talking about them. There's people on the pro-Israel side who are like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened on a college campus. And there are people on the pro-whatever side, Palestine, Hamas, whatever side you want to call it, who are like, this is just free speech, you know. And I think, you know, my position, and I'll let you guys kind of talk about what you think. I mean, my position is probably a bit more nuanced than just going into one camp and agreeing with what everybody says on that side of the camp, or in that side. But I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts of what's going on college campuses and all the reaction, including the piece of legislation that just passed Congress.
Will you tell us first your opinion, Mr. Nuance Bro? Why don't you open it up and tell us?
Well, I mean, there's so much going on here, right? There's the issue of foreign policy and like, should the U.S. be funding Israel in their war against Hamas? There's that issue. There's the issue of free speech. Like, are we allowed to say crazy shit? Yes, not on YouTube. We might get canceled on this show, but we're allowed to say insane things. That's part of our right, our God-given right under the First Amendment, to say crazy things. And then there's the politics of it all. There's the AIPAC and the Israel lobby, who exercise a lot of influence over Congress, and they're certainly exercising that influence right now. And there's just so many factors. When I say the nuanced position, I just recognizing that there are complications to either side of the issue. And I just see people, for the most part, there's some people on the right who are finally like, okay, this bill that you just passed in Congress, that is a bridge too far. There are some people on the right saying that, but there's still some defending it because they're just willing to defend anything when it comes to the Israel-Hamas or Israel-Palestine conflict on the Israeli side. And I just think that's low-level type thinking.
That's fair. I mean, yeah, you're right. I don't disagree with that. I think my where I center on this is mostly on because I don't think these kids care or know about foreign policy, and I don't think these kids care or know much about I mean, they care about free speech, but like I don't think at their core they care about it. I think these kids are often just riding the wave of whatever is popular, and they're kind of going out and doing it. But should then you use the arm of government to, like, in some instances, ruin these kids' lives? Like, I think you have a lot of these kids who cross the line whether it's, you know, you're not supposed to have the encampment and you have the encampment, or you're prohibiting people from crossing campus and getting to class, or you're interrupting graduation ceremonies, and you're doing these things that are actually problematic versus the kids who are just there protesting and exercising civil disobedience. And I think a lot of those are getting lumped into one, but I think the bigger conversation that it's we've kind of, not us, but as the royal we have kind of touched upon, but not really, is that a lot of these are like paid protesters inciting this stuff that are trying to get these kids riled up, and these kids are dumb enough to go along with it. Just like every other one of these major protests over the past 3 years, people have been dumb enough to follow along with whatever inciters are in the crowd. And so I think you get to that point that's like, all right, well, maybe we should take a step back and kind of try to sort through this. And I don't know that that's happening. You know, you just keep seeing these tweets from in Texas, legislators being like, yeah, take these kids down, like kick them out of school. And I'm like, okay, like really, like you want to ruin this kid's life for being an idiot? Like, I thought a couple of years ago we said we didn't want to do that. We didn't want kids to have their lives ruined over doing and saying stupid stuff. Is it wrong in many instances? Yeah. Do I agree with it? No. But should their lives be permanently ruined because of something that they said when they were 17, 18 years old? Because they're an idiot. No. What kid hasn't gotten arrested like at 16, 17, 18, you know? Not for doing the things they're doing, but
a lot of kids have not been arrested at 16, 17, 18.
Not arrested, like
vast majority.
Not arrested, but found themselves in conflict with police, whether that's running from a party or, you know, something, not getting necessarily arrested for a serious offense. But
Carl, you have some stories to tell?
I was arrested at 16.
What?
I mean, it was stupid. It was a dumb situation. We were at a Sweet 16. All the guys in the Sweet 16, I don't know if you guys had these in Texas, but girls had Sweet 16s, and they would have a Sweet 16 court with 16 guys, 16 girls. And then, so all of the 16 of us guys went off to go smoke weed. And
why in quotations?
because I didn't smoke weed at the time. I just went to hang out.
At the time?
Huh?
At the time.
Now either, but I'm just saying.
Uh-oh.
But then we got arrested for trespassing because we were like by these train tracks smoking weed behind this thing. And so, but yeah, I was 16. I did community service, whatever.
What do you think changed, Charles? I wonder. So you say just a couple of years ago, we were all saying like, yeah, they're young. We don't want to, ruin their lives over something that's something they said when they're young and dumb and all that stuff. What changed? Why is this one different, do you think?
I think a couple things. I don't think this one is specifically different. I think when you look
different to them,
to who?
The people that said, hey, these are young kids, like they're stupid. They're going to do dumb things. We don't agree with them, but let them say their stupid stuff. What's different this time?
Sure. And I know where you're encouraging me to go, but I don't think that's the answer. I think what is different this time, it's the same thing that was different from the BLM protest to the January 6th protest. It's politics. I think people are so caught up in their tribal mentality that they don't view this as an issue, but they view the other as an issue. And so I think that's really what the difference is. These people are protesting something that these kids are protesting against something that they agree with, just like the January 6th protesters were protesting against something that they agreed with, or protesting against something they agree with, but they agree with the protesters. And so they sided with them. And so I think that's what it is. I mean, because you cannot look at, sure, there were BLM riots, without a doubt, but immediately after January 6th, what did everybody say? Oh, who supported the January 6th protesters? Oh, there were people in the crowd inciting the riots. But yet when that argument was made for the BLM protest 6 months to a year before that, it was like, that could never be true. So, I mean, it's the same thing. It's just the same thing of an opposite coin. It's politics.
Mm-hmm.
What are you insinuating, Brad?
Is it just politics, and who's influencing those politics? I'm confused. I just want to know if it's just politics, who's influencing the politics to make this political issue specifically such a hot button issue. I mean, I have zero sympathy for all of this, by the way, because we had the summer of love, right, with the BLM riots and people protesting all over the place during COVID. And of course, you can go out. COVID is a threat to everyone's health. Don't go outside unless, of course, you're protesting racial justice. Then you can go out and you can be in a crowd and you do whatever the hell you want. Well, you can destroy property. You can do whatever, and nothing will happen. Antifa can do whatever the fuck they want. They can throw Molotov cocktails at federal buildings. Who cares, right? And there's been all sorts of terrible rhetoric on college campuses for a long time now. And all of a sudden, on this specific issue, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for it.
There was no legislative push to ban speech in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests. This is it. I agree with Brad. It's different. And I don't necessarily think the only issue there is the influence. I think, gosh, I'm going to get us in trouble. Oh, God.
Do it.
I think there are certain factions, and well, as an example, Ben Shapiro.
Real quick. Michael has said a couple of times on this podcast, like, I'm about to get us in trouble. And then, like, when he says it, it's something like, oh, I'm going to say the word. And he goes, gosh, dang it. And then, like, it's like, all right. So please, go ahead.
Ben Shapiro said the other day, and I don't know what the context was, but he's like, part of the reason we protect Israel is because if the Muslim world controlled it, we wouldn't be able to do archaeological digs to find the proof that Jesus existed. And that's what
you think the protest?
My point of bringing that up is for many on the religious Christian right that are huge parts of the conservative movement. It's a religious reason. Like, it's part of their religion. If we let Israel go, that's God's chosen land and we won't be able to prove that Jesus existed. And it's partially at least driven by a religious belief, which it would explain, why we're willing to go to great lengths.
I have a really hard time believing that the average Christian Zionist has thought in the least about if Israel gets destroyed or is taken over by Muslims, then we're not going to be able to find proof of Jesus' existence. That sounds.
Well, I think
I don't know that it's explicit. I don't know that it's explicit. In that
I think
way.
that they might support it because of a religious belief of that's God's chosen land or whatever and all that stuff. And it kind of bothers me when politicians talk about God's chosen people, and it's well, that makes them quite special, and you're going to do extra special things to protect them. Whereas I'm not God's chosen person, I guess, and so I don't get the same treatment. It seems kind of weird. Kristi Noem, right behind me, Charles's favorite politician. She said something like that, and it's kind of like, well, that rubs me the wrong way a little bit.
Wait, what rubs you the wrong way that she said that Israel is God's chosen land?
That we have to support Israel because Jews are God's chosen people.
Okay.
Does that not make sense? Like, if they're talking about one specific group of people as God's chosen, and you're not of that group, doesn't that bother you a little bit that maybe they're going to do extra special things to protect these extra special people that they wouldn't do for you?
I mean, not particularly for me, because I read the Bible. I don't no, it doesn't.
It doesn't matter if you read the Bible or not.
Right, so I don't take offense to it, though. Is what I'm saying, because I feel like it tracks the I don't feel offended by that. No, is what I'm saying. I think
I'm not offended.
Oh, you just said you were offended.
I'm saying it makes me a little concerned that I'm not a part of that, but they say, well, these are God's chosen people. We need to do extra special things for these people because they're God's chosen, right?
So,
but I'm not. I'm just a regular little white guy.
Well, and I want to clarify, I have not read the Bible from beginning to end. I have not. But I mean, by
your mom's gonna be so pissed off at you.
But by accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, so I don't necessarily agree with your argument, but I can see where you're coming from. Maybe a little bit, maybe.
I mean, if I said that white people are America's chosen people, wouldn't that bother you?
It's different. I mean, it is different.
Let's say white people are God's chosen people. Wouldn't that bother you? Or Asians?
I mean, but there's no historical context.
Who gives a fuck what the historical context is if that's what they believe?
But the reason they believe it is because of the historical and biblical context of that. So
go ahead.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't care about the history of it, right? If we are forced to pay into this government system, and they can take as much money from us as they want and give it to whoever they want, and we can't do anything about it, well, I guess we could vote harder, and maybe that'll change. Good luck. But if you're saying that one group is God's chosen, whether it's Jewish people, white people, black people, Asian people, or whatever, I'm paying into the system and being forced to participate against my will, then they're going to treat those people differently. And that's not the purpose of government. The government is supposedly not supposed to treat people differently.
So, and I think you're making a great point. I think what you're making a great point is that we're using government to pursue a religious agenda. And I think that is a very fair point that you're making, which is completely separate and apart from whether or not they're God chosen. Like, all of that is a separate question. Whether or not you believe that they are, the question is, should our government be using our tax dollars to pursue an agenda that is derived from that? And I think that's a fair question. I would argue, regardless of arguing for or against that we do that for so many places. And should we do it? I think it's a broader question that is not specific to Israel.
The level, well, I agree. The level to which we are willing to do with what Charles just said, I'm responding to him. We do it not just in Israel, but we're funding Ukraine, like Ukraine, I would just say the extent to which we're willing to go when it involves Israel is a higher degree than anywhere else. And as an example, the Congress just passed a bill that said you can't say certain things about the state of Israel or the Israeli people, which is a complete violation of the First Amendment regardless of if I agree with it or not, what people are saying or not, you can't tell people what they can and cannot say.
Which I think goes back to the point, which I think is where we all agree, is that is conflating the kind of religious tie to Israel and what we are using our government to enforce. And those two things should be separate. Right. We should not be passing laws saying you cannot speak ill or whatever your speech is of another country. Like that is essentially somewhat like saying you can't speak ill about British people. I mean, it's kind of. Yeah. But
the Republican Party just was on a crusade for 2.5, 3 years or whatever about free speech. They're holding hearings. They're lifting up the Twitter files. Like they were going through all this stuff about suppression of speech and how they're the free speech party. And then all of a sudden, when it becomes Israel that people are talking bad about, they are not free speech advocates anymore. They are just employing the tactics of the left that they were just criticizing for the last 3 years to shut people up. They don't want to speak.
And I agree with that. But to my earlier point, how is that any different than all of the things that the Republican Party does a reversal on, that they disagree with the Democrats on? Then when it comes to other issues that they side with, they change their policy positions. I mean, how is that any different? And yes, Brad's probably gonna be like, give me one example, and I'm gonna have to think of one now. But how is that any different than
what makes you think I don't agree with you?
I don't think you definitely disagree. I just felt like the give me an example was coming. But I don't see that as different than anything else that the party does, because it is and going back to the BLM January 6th protest, don't see that as any different than them refusing to believe that there were infiltrators in the BLM protest, but immediately believing that there were that they were in the January 6th protest. You know, supporting cops when it's convenient for them, and then opposing cops when it's not. You know, supporting civil asset forfeiture when they see it being good, and then you previously opposing it before Democrats also opposed. I mean, it's a constant thread in the party.
Yeah, well, it's especially, Michael, going back to the bill that you're talking about, the anti-Semitism bill or whatever. They're allowing, what's the name of the organization? They're getting the definition of anti-Semitism from whatever website, the Israeli.
Huh?
No, it's something else. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're in the bill. It's referencing a website and about anti-Semitism, and they get to define what it is. So this third party gets to say, here's what anti-Semitism means. And that's what it means today to them, but they might come up with another definition, something else that's also anti-Semitic. And we could agree or disagree all day about whether it's anti-Semitic or not. But there's this third party that's not governmental, that we have no control over, that gets to decide what we can and cannot say, which is especially strange. I don't know that that's ever happened. Is that something they normally do, is allow third parties to define what something is in a bill? That in perpetuity they can change?
Well, I don't think we have bills like this, period. So this would be a first, and a first in terms of like what you can and cannot say. So whether or not they've historically allowed third parties to decide what definitions are is kind of irrelevant in this case, because they've never done this.
Yeah. Well, now we're... What?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say one thing that I want to acknowledge, that I could be I am very biased about this issue, just because, or in large part because of the role that Jewish people played in the civil rights movement as well. And so I completely acknowledge that I might not be viewing it through an objective lens. It is very subjective, because I do look at that as some context that influences the way I'm thinking about it today.
I've got a question. I don't want to.
I've got an answer.
I don't want to keep us on this topic. Did we have a major anti-Semitism problem before October 7th in America?
Okay, it's a good question. I don't know. I'm not Jewish.
Sorry?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't, because here's the thing. I said the same thing the other day to one of my friends. I was like, I didn't realize anti-Semitism was such a thing. And he's like, we've always dealt with this. It's just now being put on full display. I did not realize prior to October 7th that it was a thing. And I think it's a similar sense to how post George Floyd, there was a big conversation about how black people feel in America, and a lot of white people were like, I never realized this happened. And so I don't know. I can't say that we did or didn't, but from people I've spoken with, some people say that we have, and it's just not something that's gone noticed.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like showing up to like synagogues and stuff and like threatening to blow them up, I don't recall seeing that much stuff on the news about that prior to October 7th. But in different one-on-one experiences and things like that. I mean, remember a couple years ago, there was that the Orthodox Jewish boy who they recorded the video of. He was walking down the street in New York, and it was like a black guy who came up to him and started making fun of him, and like it was a whole thing about it. Yes, that was a one-off incident, but I do know that Orthodox Jews in New York and in Brooklyn have had incidences like that happen a lot. So I don't know what the rate of those are, but so I can't speak to it. I really can't. I don't know. You guys.
Why do black people hate Jewish people? That's the example you came up with, man. I don't know. I'm just extrapolating.
It was one anecdote.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer. I know that anti-Semitism has always existed, and that is what it is. Is it more now? Probably, in the sense that how they define anti-Semitism for criticism of the government of Israel is now anti-Semitic. So sure, I guess in a way now it is more. We are a more anti-Semitic society, though I don't believe that that's anti-Semitism. I don't particularly like the government of Israel in the sense that I think that they're a government, and so therefore they lie through their teeth every chance they get, just like every other government. They're not unique. And so am I anti-Semitic for thinking that?
According to this new law, you are. That was my point. That was my point. Are we interchanging the words anti-Semitism with criticism of the actions of a government? And we started to talk about this last week. And you can have, it's okay to have opinions on either side of what the Israeli government is doing in response to the horrific attacks of October 7th. It's fine to have an opinion of that. But if then you label one side of that argument as anti-Semitism and say you can't say that, you're basically saying you can't criticize the actions of a government in response to a terrorist attack, which just seems crazy. Why couldn't I criticize them?
I wonder, why is that? Why can't you do it? What's going on?
What do you want to say, Brad?
I'm asking a question.
I think that there are some people who do say you can't criticize it, just like no hold bar, like you cannot say a thing. And then I think others, because I heard somebody say this the other day, that if you look at it in the context of like America, and I don't know if I'm going to get these numbers right, but someone said along the lines of if they had attacked Galveston, it would be the equivalent of 42,000 Americans being killed. And I don't know if that number was right, but I believe that's what they said. And so would you respond the same way to the United States if there were that many people in proportion to our population killed and the United States responded, right? Like, I mean, if it was the biggest attack on them since the Holocaust. And so I don't know what that would be for us. Maybe, I mean, Pearl Harbor is not even an equivalent example, but just say Pearl Harbor, and then we responded to that. I mean, how
we can criticize. I think we did it on the show. We criticized the government's response to that with the nuclear bombs, right? And people criticize the government's response to 9/11 going in and attacking countries that had nothing to do with it.
Right. I'm not saying it should be illegal. I'm just saying the people who are pushing back against it, I see their perspective. I can see like they might push back against those examples I just mentioned as well, but I can also see why someone would oppose pushback against it, is what I'm saying. But in terms of using government to ban the speech, no.
Yeah, but we went through this after 9/11. If you opposed what the government did, they called you. They said you're either with the terrorists or with America. Like they used the same kind of labeling to shut down any even valid criticism of the response. And I think that the same tactics are being used here. And all I'm suggesting is people should be free to criticize the actions of any government. I don't care, including us and the Israeli government. I mean, we haven't even got into the merits of what the criticisms could possibly be. We're just arguing about whether or not you should be able to say it. And I think it's crazy that we've I'm not talking about the three of us. I'm talking about in the country. I think it's just crazy that some people on the right, including the vast majority of the Republican Party, supported a bill that says you can't say things critical of another government, especially because we're giving them our tax dollars.
And I agree with you there. And to clarify my position before, I think if you want to say something critical of somebody and then Brad wants to argue against that, fine. Both of you have the right to do that. If you want to say something critical of somebody or something and Brad wants to pass a bill to ban you from saying that, that's when it becomes a problem. So I completely agree.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to pass a bill. We should get some people in the cup. We got some people watching. They should comment down below. What do they think? That would be
Brian Searle. I mean, he's been our number one viewer. He hasn't been back for a couple of weeks. I don't know what we said.
Who is it?
Michael's brother. Ever since you said that thing about that he had to correct you on, he wrote like a 14-paragraph response. Remember? He's never come back since then. I can't remember.
I'd love to hear Brian Searle's thoughts if he wants to comment.
He's probably.
And what's the other Papa Roach? What's his name? Philip Roach. Who I think I might know, by the way. So, do you want to move on, Michael? What do you want to do?
Do you guys have anything else on that? I mean, we spent half the show talking about it. I can definitely move on.
I mean, I have no sympathy for this. I don't really care. I think there's such bigger issues that we need to be focusing on. I think it's totally fucked that the government has this like super heavy-handed response to this specifically. And yeah, maybe some response is warranted, fine, but we've had shit like this a lot in the past 5 years, let's say, and hardly anything was done. It was allowed, basically, stand down orders, that kind of stuff. And it's just the juxtaposition there is really activates the almonds.
Charles?
No
thoughts?
Okay. I just hope my position was clear. I agree with you guys for the most part, full stop. My agreement is that government shouldn't be used to enforce speech. I do agree that I can see why the other side is being argued in terms of what is said and what should be said, which I think I just made my argument even less clear by saying that.
I'm not even sure if you're speaking English, man. I don't know what's happening.
He's saying the pushback against people who are criticizing the state of Israel, the actions of the state of Israel, is justified. The pushback, not legally, but the pushback rhetorically.
Right. Yeah. Feel free to say what you want back and forth on that. But yes, using government to enforce or prohibit certain speech, I think is where we become from. Because
next, Charles is going to say he agrees with them.
No, I don't agree with that.
The protesters. You were wearing a shirt before we started recording. I advised you to take it off, but it said something about river to sea or something. I don't know.